quite a bit going on. So, how do you want me to make this?
What's that?
Slides.
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead. As you all know, here's a picture of the lake. Pretty much everybody knows the boundaries of that, but just thought I'd give that as a short overview. That's where I spend the majority of my time, is in the watershed, and Terry does as well. Go ahead. When we started this nutrient management planning process, we started talking about nutrient management plans. We're going on, what, 5 years now? In 2009, I did an inventory of the current plans that we had in place, and those were all voluntary plans at the time. About 23% of the producers in the watershed had a nutrient management plan, and right now we are at 100%. So everybody that meets the rules has a plan that's been submitted to DNR. So we're still in the process of reviewing some of those plans, but right now we did hit that 100%. We do have 90% of the cropland, right at 42,000 acres of the approximate 46,000 acres that's in the watershed covered in a nutrient management plan. There's several reasons why we don't have all 46,000 acres. Some of those acres don't receive manure, some of them can't receive manure, just various reasons. With the nutrient management plans, we have right at 80 plans that are going to expire in 2015, and the reason we're so loaded in 2015 is because the rules started in 2012, and so a lot of people waited till the last year to get their plans submitted. So we're right at 80 plans that are going to need to be updated. Each one of those plans takes about 30 to 40 hours to update depending on the plan. Some are easier than other ones. So on average, we're trying to even them out throughout the 3 years, because we have right at 149 farms that meet the rules. We're trying to do about 50 a year. So if significant changes are made at the farm, they have to update those not more often than every 3 years. So on average, we're right at 50 plans per year that need updated. When you do the math, that's about a little more than one plan per week this year is what we're going to have to do. There are 149 farms that today meet the distressed watershed rules. That number fluctuates up and down. When we started this, we were at 156. We've lost some farms and etc. Within those 149 farms that meet the rules, we have actually 305 farms that have livestock at them in the watershed. And the reason for that is a lot of the dairy farms will have a separate farm where they have their heifers at. So with that, we have to do site inspections at all 300 of those farms. So that's why it's taken so long, is because just the number of farms that we actually have to visit. I'm going to change gears a little bit, and I talked to Tim a little bit about what we were going to talk about this week. One thing that I think Terry and I haven't done a good job of relaying is what is actually in a CNMP plan. The rule requirements and nutrient management plan to meet the rules, when we were looking at this, we decided that the best route to go to encompass everything and be more detailed on the farms would be to encourage everyone to do a comprehensive nutrient management plan, which takes a lot more work and a lot more information goes into them. But at the end of the day, I think we have a better idea, the whole picture of what's going on at the farm. So that's what we've been encouraging as far as the rules, to go ahead and spend more time to do the comprehensive plan. Within that plan, there's 9 main sections. Each plan averages 60 to 80 pages per plan. These plans are updated every 3 years, or as I said, if there's a significant change at the operation, they have to update that as that change occurs. So within that plan, in the first section, it's an overview general description of the farm. It's going to explain how many farms this guy operates, if he's got a dairy here and his heifers here, if he has hogs there. It's going to explain each one of those operations, and we're going to identify those in detail as to what is at each operation. There's 2 pages in there on proper soil sampling and manure sampling techniques on how to actually do the sampling. Manure application calibration. That way the guys have the tools to figure out how much manure they're putting on their fields, how they can calibrate that and check that. And then also we're going to identify the resource concerns. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. But it lays everything out on a one-page general description of the farm. In section 2, we have, and I know you guys can't see these pages, not that I did that on purpose, but they're whole pages try to condense down. But the plan practices is going to show and identify, okay, here's where we're at the farm. Is this guy planning on doing anything significant in the next 3 years that we need to identify in the plan? It could be a structural practice, it could be grass waterway, it could be filter strips, it could be cover crops. All that's laid out in what they're planning on doing. And then it also goes through our operation and maintenance section. Okay, we have a holding pond in place. What do they need to do yearly to keep that up in maintenance? Do they need to mow that? Do they need to keep their fence intact? What kind of practices do they need to pay attention to on the concrete and everything? And then we're going to have aerials of each one of those farms in there identifying where is the storage structure at this farm. What are the resource concerns? What areas do we need to be watching on each individual headquarters? Section 2 goes in and lays out each one of the animals. We're going to classify the animals as to how many dairy cows he has, how many dry cows he has, how many calves, and we're going to do weights on that. And then we're also going to identify what is his manure storage. Does he have a dry stack? Does he have a pen pack? Does he have a holding pond? And with that, we're going to run through calculations to determine how much storage does he have. Does he have a year in his holding pond? Does he have 3 months of pen pack? 6 months of dry storage? We're going to calculate that all out. And then in the next section, we're going to say, okay, this manure from these dairy cows, it's going to go into this storage structure. So it's going to go into the holding pond, or it's going to go into the dry stack. And we're going to identify each one of those. Also, we look at mortality management. How's that producer handling their dead ones on the farm? Are they composting on site? Do they have a licensed rendering company picking them up? We just don't want them laying out there in the middle of the fields. Also, one thing that we've spent a lot more time on is pinpointing exports off the farm. So we can't just have a guy come in and say, well, I just get rid of my manure. Well, what are you doing with it? Are you selling it? Okay, yeah, I'm selling it. Well, who are you selling it to? And then we get the names and spreading agreements of where that manure is going. So even if it's going outside the watershed on somebody else's property, if it's part of the plan, we're going to identify those acres in the plan. So all those exports, we can't just say that manure is disappearing. If it's going to a broker, then we need the name of the broker and how many tons they're taking. So that all is included in the plan. If they're bringing manure on the farm from somebody else, that's included. Also, one thing that often gets skipped is the emergency and biosecurity. It's dangerous to work on the farm. We have manure storage structures that can be dangerous. So we go through and identify some emergency contacts. What happens if their barn catches on fire and they have 1,000 hogs that are dead? What are they going to do with them? So we lay that out for them. Also in one section we have soils maps. So each one of the fields that are in the plan, we're going to identify those fields in the plan, and we're going to give them actual maps to show what the setbacks are for manure applications under certain circumstances. We're going to show those guys on a visual map where they should be applying manure. And then also in that, it's going to identify the soils, which is important because some soils can take more manure applications based on the water holding capacity than other soils in a manure application. So it gives them an idea of what soils they need to be watching and which ones are more apt to be higher producing soils. It's going to identify wells, etc. on those maps as setback areas. Section 4, we're looking at plan practices. We're going to be looking at their crop rotation. What's their crop rotation? What's their yield goals? Are they going to put cover crops in? Do they put cover crops in? How many acres of cover crops? Where are they going to put those cover crops? We're going to be looking at hay buffers. If they have grass waterways, hay buffers. We're looking at the nutrient management plan, and we're going to identify those acres down. And then let's say a guy doesn't have cover crops, but he's interested in trying it. We're going to put that in the plan as a trial process. Section 5. This is one thing that we have to go through calculations on each one of the fields to do a phosphorus risk assessment. What we're looking at is the ground cover that's out there, the application rates, the soil tests that they're using, and we're going to categorize those as a low, medium, or high potential for runoff. That includes tile drainage, open ditches. All that runs through a calculation. We do each one of those for each field, and then we can let them know, okay, when you're in this field, this is what you need to be paying attention to. This is just more in addition to the phosphorus risk assessment, and if we identify a field as a low risk, we're going to tell them what practices they need to do in a low risk situation. In a high risk, we're going to identify, okay, this field has higher potential for leaching off. You have elevated soil test phosphorus. You need to be looking at changing your crop rotation up, installing buffer strips, putting a cover crop in, that type of stuff on the field itself. We also have charts in here that go through the application rates and timing based on the time of year that you're putting manure out there, whether it's going to be crop available. The application rates are going to vary from the fall versus the spring. If you're putting it out there for spring, obviously you're going to be putting new seed out there that's going to take up some of those nutrients. Your application rates could be different based on the time of year. We're going to look at the nitrogen leaching index, if that manure is put out in the fall, if commercial fertilizer is put out there. And we're also going to take account for what's the soil capacity of the soil when we're putting the manure out there. You can't always put 5,000 gallons of manure out there. You always got to account for the moisture that's already in the soil and then back your rate off from there. And it gives them a visual chart of how can they do that. Is it by feel? Is it by touch of the soil? How can they time that application? This here is one of the most important parts of the nutrient management plan. It's section 6. We're looking at a soil manure analysis. What we do is for each one of those manure storage structures, whether that's a holding pond, if they have 2 dry stacks, if they have pin pack, we're making them take a sample of each one of those storages, and then we're taking those manure analysis samples and comparing them to, okay, is that sample realistic? Was that a good sample based on all the other samples that we're looking at? That way we don't get a really low sample or a really high sample and it's not truly reflective. The manure tests are required every year. They have to take an annual sample of that, and just because of the variability of that sampling process. And then the soil tests are required every 3 years, a minimum of 1 sample per 25 acres. On that, most of the guys in the watershed are doing grid sampling, so we're getting 1 per 2 acres, 1 per 5 acre samples. And then we're taking that and putting it in the plan, and this is going to be our ultimate record keeper. It's going to take many years. It's probably going to take 10 years. That would give us 3 samples to see what is the trending pattern per these fields. Are these soil samples going up? Are they going down? Are they staying the same? That's how we're going to be able to monitor the success of the plans, whether they've been followed or not. We can put anything down on paper, but at the end of the day, when you look at the science behind the sampling, we're going to have some variability in those. Don't get me wrong, based on when the samples are pulled. If you have a guy pulling them in the spring one year and the fall next year, you're going to get some differences in those samples. And that's part of the challenges of what we're doing in the watershed, to do some education on the importance of consistency with your sampling procedures, your record keeping, and everything on that end. The section 6 also has the planned nutrient applications. What we do is we go through each manure storage, we lay out each crops for a 3-year period, planned crops in the rotation, and then we empty that storage based on the crops that are out there and the nutrient content. So with the computer program, it can help us calculate, okay, in November this year, after corn, we're going to put out 10 ton of pin pack from this storage in this field, and we're going to lay that out for 3 years on all the fields, all the manure storages. And then we're also going to account for the commercial fertilizer. We're going to get an idea from the guy, is he just putting nitrogen out there? Is he adding potash on his hay? What's he buying commercially and adding that in? We're going to account for that in the program. And then also in section 6, it's going to give us projected phosphorus and a nutrient balance. So it's going to tell us, okay, based on what you had in there crop-wise last year, the residue left over, your credits that you're given. If you have soybeans, it's going to have some credits given. You account for that in there, and then it's also going to lay out, okay, once that's accounted for last year's residue, what do I need to add in addition, and then at the end of the day, what's my balance? So we do our best to put that in a balance or in a drawdown mode based on the soil test. Some fields we have to do a buildup if they have really low phosphorus. We have a lot of fields right on the south side of the lake that haven't had manure put on them for years. Some of those fields may be in a buildup mode, some of them may be in a drawdown. And then at the end of the day, it accounts for everything, and it says if you follow this plan verbatim, at the end of the year, we have a soil test level of 80 when we started, and it might drop down to 76 at the 3-year period if you're in a drawdown mode on that field. So it gives an overall projection of the farm at the end of the 3-year period. One of the most important things as far as the rules go is the record keeping portion, which everybody hates records. It's like doing taxes. Nobody likes to do them. With the records, we're requiring the guys to keep actual crop and yield records as harvested. Keep in mind these are plans. If a guy puts that he's going to put corn silage out this year and beans next year and wheat the following year, and for whatever reason it's wet and he has to go corn silage, that will make a difference in his plan. So that's why he needs to keep those actual crop and yield records so that we can go back and look as to what he actually did. The actual manure production and actual application records. How much did he produce? Where did he put it? We'll be able to tell that on the soil test. If he's putting the manure in this field, when that soil test comes back, we're going to be able to see it on there. Actual commercial nutrient applications. If commercial fertilizers rise in price, sometimes guys are backing off, how much they're putting out there. Annual manure samples from each storage. The whole reason for that is when we go to update the plan, I'd rather have 3 manure samples to average to get an average look at their manure production than 1 sample. Soil tests are going to be every 3 years, and also the manure imports and exports off the farm. So if they did haul to a guy in All-Glaze County that wanted manure, we're going to have records of that guy's soil test, the dates he hauled, how much he hauled, and we're going to be looking at that in the plan and their records. How do we get information to develop the CNMPs and update them? Well, part of it is, you can come in and we can go over stuff, but we have to verify the information that they're giving us. And how we do that is we go out, and every farm that has animals at it, we go out and we have a 9-page site review that we go out and meet the farmer, spend about an hour or 2 hours at the farm, we walk around all the facilities, and we visually look to see if there's any resource concerns that we feel will be an issue or that are an issue. We get actual lab reports of the soil and manure analysis, so we get those straight from the lab. And then we also have the manure application records, and in that, one thing that we've learned is, it sounds crazy, but we're asking guys to take their manure spreaders across the scales to actually weigh them, because most of our manure spreaders on the solid end are rated at 10 tons. Very few of them are actually hauling 10 tons of manure. When we go through our calculations to balance this out, if we're basing, a guy tells us, hey, I hauled 26 loads of manure this year at 10 tons, well, if you go and you actually measure it, he hauled 26 loads, but they only weighed 6 tons. That's a big difference in the nutrient plan development. So we're getting crossways with some of the guys that are looking at us like, you got to be kidding me. I'm not taking my manure spreader across the scales down there. But it's benefited a lot of guys. We haven't done a very good job of knowing how many loads of manure are we hauling out of our buildings. We don't know, we just haul the manure. So we've done a very good job in the last couple of years of tracking this, and we found a couple guys to make very good examples of and the importance of it, and it's spreading throughout the watershed that the records are probably one of the biggest benefits of doing the plan itself. Moving forward, we got basically 1 year or 1 round. It's a 3-year process. We got this round under our belt as far as getting the plans developed, going out and just getting the plan together to begin with. Moving forward, our biggest challenge is going to be building the producers and the staff knowledge of the realities of the information in the CNMPs. We can sit behind a computer and run stuff all day long, but the realities of it, we got to know what's actually out there. And the only way to do that is through the records. And we got to be able to go out and tell these guys, what does the water capacity chart mean? What does your manure analysis mean? What does the phosphorus index risk mean? So that's going to be our biggest challenge. Now that we've identified the major things, the easy things, I call them the cherries on the tree. We went out and we looked at the headquarters, we spotted this, this, and this. We fixed those. Now we're going to get into what we need to do out on the fields. We got this plan in place, we've identified these are your high fields. We need to be looking at moving your manure from these fields to these other fields. And that's going to be our challenge in the next couple years, is this a good place to put a filter strip in? Is this a good place to put a waterway in? Education, we haven't had a whole lot of time to do a lot of education practices. This is an example going back to the manure spreaders of the differences of what does 4 tons of manure look like on the field? What does 20 tons of manure look like? So we've gone through some education process, and that goes back to the moisture in the soil. We can have 2 5-gallon buckets of manure, one weighs 10 pounds, one weighs 20 pounds, just based on the moisture. We're going to be looking at the fields. If we're having runoff concerns, what's causing that runoff? A lot of times you're looking at the plow layer, that lateral movement through the soil. We're looking at wormholes. We're looking at breaking up that soil before manure applications and incorporating that soil to give it the ability to stay there. We've had a lot of field days. We've had some decent attendance at the field days. We've had a lot of people come in. We're looking at alternatives to handle wastewater, getting it on a growing crop and not letting it sit out there from November till April when we got new crops coming in. Looking at on-farm wetland treatment systems for milk house wastewater. We're the only watershed in the state that can verify that we've taken 100% of the milk house wastewater systems out of the waste stream. We have right at, I did the calculations the other day, I think we're right at 51 milk house or dairies in the watershed. So those wastewaters are all out of the waste stream. We're looking at irrigation systems, tile stops. We've had some limited success because of the topography of the land in Grand Lake to do some tile control structures to back that water up. Northwest Lake Erie, you're going to see a lot of those. Hundreds of those structures are going in right now. We are not blessed with the flatlands that they are, so those are going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we do have some of those in place. This is just an example of wastewater being irrigated from an anaerobic treatment lagoon from a hog farm going on a hay field. 3 weeks later they're harvesting that. That's the limited time that that manure is out there for it to run off, and then it's turned around and being harvested back off. We got cover crops going out. We were just talking the other day, we have a lot of cover crops in the watershed, but what's nice about that right now is very few of those are having any incentive dollars behind them. That means that guys have adopted them on their own and they're doing it as a normal practice. So I think that's a really good thing to see in the watershed right now, how many cover crops are actually out there. One thing that we've done a lot of is waste transfer to new fields, and through the CNMP process to identify those fields that are high and show that we need to truck that off has been a big benefit. I can tell you that this is working because my complaints outside the watershed have increased. Manure is going to fields that haven't seen manure for 20, 30 years, which is a good thing. They're buying less commercial fertilizer on those acres, but we do have some challenges. If you're living somewhere and you haven't seen manure in your whole life at that farm, and next thing you know, a guy's spreading hog manure, we start to get questions, and rightfully so. So that has been one big challenge, we know a lot of the liquid manure that's being trucked out, we're right at 20 miles, so we can truck that 20 miles. I followed a semi-truck from the middle of the watershed this fall. I had a farm to go to over in Always County, and I followed him all the way through Shelby County until he had a field over there he was applying to. So we know it's working. The other thing that we've been able to do is collaborate with some guys that had some dry manure or hog manure, and we've enticed them guys to haul that off and then take their neighbor's manure that's not as mobile, We've had guys swapping land. A guy might own fields over here that are low in phosphorus because he don't want to take his manure there. We got a guy sitting there that needs acres, so he's taking his manure over those fields. We got a lot of those collaborations set up, and so far they seem to be working. There's always challenges with that stuff, but we know that those situations are working.